To the memory of the local cinema, the bioscopes, biographs, Rexes, Roxys and Rialtos, and all who worked in them. The ushers, usherettes, cashiers, projectionists.
To the smell of oily floor, perfume disinfectant, and human perspiration. To reels projected in the wrong order, the scratches and the breaks.
And to the full supporting program, this film is affectionately dedicated.
It must have been when I was around 7 years old. I saw my first Laurel and Hardy film. And then after that, every Saturday when the Laurel and Hardy movies came to town, I watched all of them, all day Saturday and into the evening, until my mother and father came and got me out.
My treat was to go to the news theatre. And always the news theatre was full of all the things that either delight or bore a little boy. So you sat through Mussolini and Countess of something, hitting a champagne bottle against a HMS. And then suddenly, in the darkness, you would hear...
That beats the hell out of the high and the mighty.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, we present for your entertainment and approval Laurel and Hardy in their latest comedy entitled
beautiful morning. Turn on the radio and let's have some music.
I must have been 5 years old, I guess. And I immediately knew that they were my friends.
The reasons why you love them, you cannot define when you are a child. You just love them because they are part of yourself, and they have this poetical appeal which was so great, and they made us laugh. But it's not so much that I laughed. I was sharing their dream.
They did create a world all their own and asked you to accept it. There was something almost Christian about their faith and the love and the trust that they had. They really lived life the way it's supposed to be lived, and showed us all that it doesn't work.
Another nice mess you've gotten me into.
Well, I couldn't help it. It's only
Let's get together. Let's concentrate and use our brains. Rome wasn't built in a day. Remember the old adage? A task slowly done is surely done.
To me, it was the greatest love story of all time. I think that was the basis for their longevity in films, was that they obviously loved each other and cared about each other very, very much.
Now let's get this place cleaned up.
Today, we invite you to celebrate a friendship of two different people from different parts of the world who've met and have stayed together for 29 years, for the rest of their lives.
They've made film comedies, short and long, good and bad. Over 100 of them. They didn't have much time to think about them. They did them and enjoyed themselves. And we enjoyed ourselves too. But they were just a supporting program.
And yet, almost 40 years later, their films seem to mean more and more. Could it be their friendship is immortal? To Stan Laurel, comedy was something fundamental to life, and he was the guiding spirit behind the best of their work. He spent his older years in a modest flat in Santa Monica, which became a place of pilgrimage for fans, devotees, and fellow comedians, asking for his views about the art and craft of humor.
He certainly had no idea that the comedies themselves were meaningful in any general philosophic sense. In fact, he was repelled by that kind of thinking. To him, comedy was something that you did. You learned how to do it, you did it, and you were very pleased that you did it, and you were pleased that the audience was pleased.
Stan Laurel was a real clown. He had a great sense for being the real fool in the Shakespeare sense. And there is much pathos in him. And when you sense the man, you could feel that behind the funny Stan was a philosopher, a man who had deep thoughts about life and theater.
We go through this lifetime but once, and if we were ever to meet a genius, we wouldn't know it. And in the case of Stan Laurel, I knew it, and I indeed met a genius. And a genius in life. He was a magnificent human being, and he played the role of living here better than anyone I've ever known. He breathed better. He was grateful for the fact that the lungs would suck air in and take it out. He appreciated that there were holes in his nostrils that would assist him in maintaining life. I've never met anyone like that. And when I talk of him, whether there's a camera there or not, I find myself trembling all the time. I really miss him, and I miss what I've learned, and very selfishly, I feel deprived. I would have liked for him to be here a longer time. He was one that I think they should have arranged to have live forever. They should have worked that out somehow.
In the small town of Ulverston in northwest England, the house still stands where Arthur Stanley Jefferson was born on June 16, 1895.
Next. Smile.
His father was a well-known figure in the north of England, a lessee of a great many provincial theatres, also a playwright, producer, and actor. Stan was never very good at school. He was brought up in the atmosphere of provincial theatre.
He loved the kind of a feeling of music and a kind of a bump-de-bump sort of atmosphere in all of his work. He thought of himself basically as a music hall comedian. And from his very earliest days, when he used to go to his dad's theaters and look at the greatest comedians in the halls, that was what he always wanted to do, and that's what he did for the rest of his life.
What are you going to do with that egg?
I'll bet you, Dolly, you can't put it in your mouth without breaking it.
Go on, take him on. You remember when you done it with a billiard ball?
That's a cinch. Get your buck ready.
At the age of 16, Stan made his first stage appearance in a short act at a small music hall in Glasgow. Unknown to him, his father was in the audience watching and congratulated him afterwards. More than 20 years later, at the height of his popularity, Stan at last admitted that the act was awful, just bloody awful. At the age of 17, Stan joined the troupe of Fred Carno, the legendary producer, a splendid school for the talents of Chaplin and Stan Laurel to develop in the field of pantomime and the music hall.
Stan brought the music hall performer from the proscenium and put it into a 35mm standard aperture frame. All he did was take the proscenium and bring it down into that, which would ultimately be exploded onto a screen equally the size of the proscenium.
It is a music hall type of comedy where they take a gag or routine and rework it, polish it from film to film as it goes along.
When in the early 1950s they returned to the music hall stage in England, it was still the same old magic. Those who saw them speak about two elderly gentlemen in supreme control of their medium, strolling onto the stage, relaxed, with all the time in the world and toying with the audience.
Once I watched Stan in the later years backstage, I think at the Hippodrome in Birmingham, just before he was going on. And like any performer, there's a nervousness, a certain tension. But the minute that he got his cue, and it was, as I recall, it was a part of the Cuckoo song, the Dance of the Cuckoos, their theme song, there was a particular beat that he started on. And just before that started, there was a beautiful warmth that came to his face as he then walked out. And then when I watched him as he came back out, and there was such a feeling of completion. It was what he was born to do, and it was deeply, deeply moving.
In September 1910, Fred Carno's troupe, with Chaplin and Stan Laurel among them, went to appear in the United States. A Night in an English Music Hall came to Broadway and traveled all across the land.
We're going to go, we're going to go, we're going to go way down in Dixie, where the hens are doggone glad to lay scrambled eggs in the newborn day. We're going to see, we're going to see.
Oliver Hardy was born in Harlem, Georgia, on the 18th of January, 1892.
Smile.
He ran a hotel. His father was of English stock. He could trace his ancestors back as far as the same Hardy from whom the dying Admiral Nelson had asked for a kiss.
His father's first name was Oliver Hardy, and his mother's maiden name was Norval. So he was named Norval Hardy. But he took the name because he was proud of his, he always said, well, it sounded more impressive, Oliver Norval Hardy.
Good evening. The name, please. Oliver Norval Hardy. I'd like to see the future Mrs. Hardy.
Come in.
Thank you.
What's your name? Stanley Laurel. Say sir when you're addressing me. Now what's your name?
Sir Stanley Laurel.
He can't help that, sir. It's a loose tooth, sir.
Yeah? What's your name?
Oliver Norval Hardy, sir.
When I interviewed Babe Hardy, he said, these two fellas have as much right to exist as anybody on earth, and they have just as much right to be called Mr. Stan and Ollie are real people, and they are good people. So I don't feel bad that people connect me with a very dumb guy. In my opinion, he is also a very nice guy, and there are a lot of him around.
A motley assortment of people on the streets of Madison, Georgia. And it was Ollie's hobby to watch them. Their faces, their clothes, the way they behaved.
He started on that, he said, as a child in his mother's hotels. He used to call himself a great lobby watcher because he loved watching people and try to figure out their characters and then watch their mannerisms. And that was part of the portrayal, the characterization, actually, that he used on the screen. He'd read a script and he might remember, oh, I saw somebody like that, such and such a place, and he would sort of build that into the characterization and develop the character.
Ollie is the elephant. Ollie is behaving with a kind of enormous elephantine elegance. This huge bulk, which is in itself very funny, is allied to tiny and beautiful gestures. All the gestures of the hands are tiny and beautiful and most elegant and exquisite. And yet you perform these alarming things.
He had the typical Southern courtly gentleman's mannerisms, holding a cup of tea with a little finger extended. Said he used to watch his mother and his Aunt Susie, which he adored. He'd watch them with the ladies they'd be drinking tea in the afternoon, come to call on his mother. And he always felt that women should always be treated with respect. And that no matter what, a lady was a lady and should always be treated as such. He thought everyone should be polite to everybody else, and there'd be no trouble in the world if people would just treat other people the way they'd like to be treated.
See what a little bit of kindness will do?
You're right. A little kindness goes a long way.
All his life he regretted not having had sufficient education. He went to school at Georgia Military College, but he was more interested in singing and in the new craze, the movies. Films were made in and around New York, in Chicago, Philadelphia, and Nickelodeons were springing up all over the country. Ollie went to Florida and got a chance to work for the Lubin Motion Pictures Company. Meanwhile, on the sunny West Coast, a small rural community at the outskirts of Los Angeles called Hollywood. A perfect place to grow fruit and vegetables. A potential gold mine waiting for its prospectors to arrive.
There's everything from soup to nuts, folks. Come and get it.
In the early and mid-1910s, Hollywood was the place to be for anyone wanting to give it a try in film comedy. A young producer was Joe Rock. He later worked with Stan Laurel.
Well, in the days that I was making the beginning of the stuff, we had an outdoor studio. There were very few indoor studios, and outdoor studios with canvas that they pull across, and reflectors would reflect the light into the set.
When the sun didn't shine, we couldn't work. We made only one reel pictures at that time, and we made one a week. And many times we'd have to make a picture in a day and a half because we only got that much sun, particularly during the winter time in California. But if we had bright sunshine, very often we were through with our picture by Friday afternoon.
The cameras, they're very heavy. They weighed about 100 pounds. and they were all cranked by hand. The cameraman would crank by hand, and he'd do that for, 5 minutes.
People that were pretty good actors got $5 a day. Just the run-of-the-mill got $3 a day. There was little Sammy Brooks, he was almost a midget. There was Earl Mohan, who played drunk parts, and Noah Young, who was the champion heavyweight lifter of Los Angeles, who was the big, tough, heavy man in the pictures.
Another regular heavy was Oliver or Babe Hardy.
By 1917, Stan too was attracted from musical to motion pictures. And in the same year, it so happened that in a short comedy, Lucky Dog, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy appeared together.
Almost by accident. It was just another job for both of them, but once it was done, they went their separate ways.
But when it was released, the film's success set off Stan on a continuous job in films. Hal Roach, by now a successful producer, launched him in his own series of short comedies. The character of the brash, aggressive, resourceful young man Stan portrayed was a success. He's joined the Hal Roach Stock Company. By 1926, he was a star.
It so happened that Oliver Hardy too was a member of the Roach Company. And Sugar Daddies is only one of a dozen short comedies made in 1927 in which they appeared together. Again, the first step was almost by accident.
It happened that Babe Hardy was in the same picture, and they were together. Then the next picture, we gave them a little more together, and we could really see that this was going to make a team. It's just seeing the two together and how they complemented each other. I mean, that they were so entirely different in type and so entirely different in character that after that we teamed them as two comedians.
Thank you, Ollie. You're welcome, Stan. I want you to remember, from now on, my home is your home.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Stan. And I'm never going to let you out of my sight again.
Thank you, Ollie.
You're welcome, Stan.
They did belong together like ham and eggs, fish and chips. There comes a particular time when certain things, after a while, have a coalescence that is almost inevitable.
Do Detectives Think? The first release film with Laurel and Hardy, officially as a team.
The moment they come together, the moment they really work together, even playing not as a team but almost opposite one another to achieve different ends, as in Putting Pants on Philip, you sense a marvelous balance, the kind of need they have to be together.
The gentleman from the South meets the visitor from Britain.
Laughing at a joke commits you to accepting the joke. There's no doubt about that, to my mind. The moment you go, ha ha ha, you bought the joke. The moment you smile with fondness for Laurel and Hardy as a team, then you require no further explanation of their being together. There was never any question. You never questioned why Babe needed Stan and Stan needed Babe. Ollie and Stan belonged together.
I can remember crying at a Laurel and Hardy movie. I never cried at a Charlie Chaplin movie. Everyone else did, but I never did. But there was a film in which they were to be separated. And it was so sad, I cried as a child.
They need one another like a ping pong ball between two rackets, you know? They exchange.
Fresh fish.
ocean this morning.
This was their genius, because they needed really one another, like black and white, like tragedy and comedy. They needed, for their equilibre, for their balance, they needed one another.
The shape of one against the other was all wrong. You know, it just didn't work out. They didn't sound like each other. How they were ever got together is a miracle.
Boy, oh boy. For the first time in our lives, we're a success. A nice little fish business and making money.
One was so stupid and one was so fat that they just had to be together, you know, just like that, just had to be together.
What we don't realize enough is that they team together like actors of high comedy. The school of the commedia dell'arte, the Greek and Roman tradition. For instance, we speak about Don Juan. We see Don Juan and his valet Leporello. We speak about Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy had to team together exactly like in the style of high comedy. It was like Sancho Panza receiving orders from Don Quixote and making it wrong, but they needed one another, and when something happens, they were both in trouble, and they didn't know how to get out of it, except one getting the help of the other one.
I think they have antecedents in drama. I think you can't see Twelfth Night without seeing something of Ollie in Sir Toby Belch, and something of Stanley in Sir Andrew Aguecheek.
Or wouldn't Laurel and Hardy fit perfectly into the dreamlike fantasy world of Alice in Wonderland?
There is never a realistic gesture. They were struggling with the absurd. They are really the ancestors of the theater of the absurd, making a finger become a flame, or they just lean against the wall and suddenly the wall crumbles down. They were absolutely surrealistic. They did absolutely impossible things I never witnessed in life. They kept a dimension which was above reality.
You can see traces of them in Beckett's play, Waiting for Godot. The fat bully Pozzo with a dithering slave at the end of a rope. I wouldn't be surprised if Sam Beckett didn't have Stan and Ollie at the back of his mind. The relationship of the complacent, smug master and the vague, dithering servant is exactly what's in Beckett's play and in the Laurel and Hardy pictures.
Why don't you watch where you're going?
They're Weary Willie and Tired Tim of the comics.
The Walrus and the Carpenter in Lewis Carroll.
Or just The Fat and the Thin.
The Fiddle and the Bow.
Morecambe and Wise.
In Sweden and Norway, they're known as Helvan and Halvan. In Denmark, Gog and Koki. In Germany, Dick und Dorf. In Hungary, Stan Espan. In Poland, Flippy Flap. In Romania, Stan and Bran. In Portugal, O Buka and O Estika. In Greek, Xanapol and Ashnoi. In Egypt, El Tikin and Rufein. In Israel, Hashemen ve Haraze. And in Turkey, Sishman ve Zaif. And I remember during the war, like Neapolitans crying out, they'd call out to somebody who they thought was a bit of a fool and say, "Way, Walio, Walio."
I think perhaps a good deal of the popularity which they now enjoy depends on their attitude to authority. Ollie is authority. Stan is the obedient one who manages to make authority no go. Authority doesn't work. Authority is made a fool of. And this beautiful, elegant, huge, stout, heavy, pompous character, which is authority, is made to slip on the famous banana skin. The banana skin, which one thinks has been worked to death and could never be funny again, with them is always funny. They show you the banana skin and you know they're going to slip on it, and there's time for them to see that Ollie is going to slip on the banana skin, and he does it with great elegance. And this use of the banana skin, I think, is a very modern reaction against authority.
Marshal Tito has a large library of their films.
They're kept by the Vatican.
Winston Churchill was one of their fans.
And Joseph Stalin another.
During 1929, the year of the Great Crash and the Depression, 14 Laurel and Hardy films were released, some of their best. It was the beginning of their vintage period, the short 20-minute comedies. Were they the suckers, never given an even break, but somehow always winning in the end? Were they just plain funny to look at? Or was there perhaps something more to it?
If you go back for centuries, the king who ran a country had to have a pressure valuation moment where he would call the court jester. When the chips are down, that's who they call. That's where they go.
Come in. How do you feel?
Fine. I didn't expect to see you here today.
Well, I didn't have anything else to do, so I thought I'd drop in and see you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What have you got there?
I brought you some hard-boiled eggs and some nuts.
Now, you know I can't eat hard-boiled eggs and nuts. If you wanted to bring me something, why didn't you bring me a box of candy?
Well, they cost too much.
Well, what has that got to do with it?
You didn't pay me for the last box I brought you. Have one?
No, I'd rather not. Hard-boiled eggs and nuts.
There were two strange angels with different weights dealing with human folly. There was never hate. There was never bitterness. They just showed us how life is and what a farce it can be.
How long do you think I'll be in here, Doctor?
Oh, at least a couple of months.
Gee, that's great. This is the first time in my life I've had such a wonderful rest.
It begins always, Stan said, and must begin always from some little episode which is based in reality and conceivably could happen.
This is all very human. We all go through it. All they did was to point it up a little bit. I actually executed a complete Laurel and Hardy turn a few years ago. A woman who lives near here had an enormous packing case, and I helped her to unpack it.
I'll get it out.
And in the course of doing so, I put my foot straight onto a nail about so long. I then behaved exactly like Hardy. I gave a wild howl of anguish. I jumped about on one foot, and I suddenly realized that I was being like Hardy, and instead of, being in agony, which I was, I forgot about the whole thing, and I haven't laughed so much for years.
They're just like a couple of kids coping with a world of enormous objects which are permanently hostile to them.
Can you tell me the last time in your entire life that you thought of what the man goes through who indeed delivers a piano to someone? You couldn't care less. All you want to get is the pleasure of the sound of that piano, but you don't care how it got there. Stan didn't want to hear about those that enjoyed the sound of the piano. He wanted to know the man that delivered it to that apartment on the 7th floor, and how the hell did he get it there.
To me, it was never the objects. It was always the incredible people who were doing it. A man who would say, quite reasonably, I can't talk to you for a moment, he would say to the person on the other end of the phone, my ear is full of milk.
Who is it? It's a lady about the trip. Oh. Just a minute, my friend Mr. Hardy will speak to you. Hello?
Excuse me, please. My ear is full of milk.
Brush that off.
Gradually, there comes under it all a kind of a beautiful simplicity, and it is also a reflection of the two men as men. They were, of course, to say the least of it, hardly their screen selves off-screen, but that innocence was certainly there. They were not devious men at all. They had a basic and beautiful simplicity to them, and they had an innocence. And however one defines gentlemanliness, they had it in depth.
Places, everybody. Quiet, please. Quiet!
Oh, what a wonderful sight.
Lights are ready! Sound is ready. Action! Camera!
Tank, an army surplus, did much of the job when the old Hal Roach studios were demolished in 1963 to make way for a car showroom. Culver City seems like the set of a shantytown that could be dismantled overnight. Miraculously, most of it still looks as it must have looked in the early 1930s, at the heyday of the Hal Roach studios. Every so often, the whole team went out to this street corner to shoot exteriors.
The pie factory is still there, from where in 1927 the total day's output was purchased to facilitate the shooting of the Battle of the Century. 4,000 pies.
And near Los Angeles, by the Silver Lake, the famous steps are still there, where in 1932 they shot The Music Box, the film by which they're perhaps best remembered.
I went out to Stan Laurel's apartment in Santa Monica, and he was, you know, quite old at the time, and it was absolutely fantastic because we remembered with absolute clarity practically every film they'd ever made and all the details of it. And it was a sort of ridiculous afternoon. We fed each other with, you know, and do you remember that sequence in such and such? And then howls of laughter. And he said, yes, but do you remember so and so? And there we were, falling about laughing like a couple of kids for hours and hours and hours. And he remembered everything.
One could almost speak of a Laurel and Hardy stock company.
Jimmy Finlay's #1 foil to Laurel and Hardy.
Mae Bush, homicidal widow.
Billy Gilbert.
Charlie Hall, foil #2.
Walter Long, a villain.
Jean Harlow, then quite unknown, appeared in one of their silent shorts.
It was fun. It was a ball. I had a ball all the time I was with them. I didn't realize I was working. It was just downright fun.
During the late 1950s, a great many of the old Laurel and Hardy films had reappeared on television. And Stan, in his old age, often watched them. They brought him back something of the old popularity, but with a new audience.
I had to play the character, kind of Dulcie, kind of a bum-ingenue, you know. And I'm engaged to marry Ollie, and I tell my father I'm going to be married, and he nearly falls apart. And I call Ollie up, and I said, oh, terrible things happened. And I'm crying on the phone, and he says, well, we'll elope. Don't you worry, Dulcie, darling. And I said, oh, how romantic.
How romantic.
Now listen, Dulcie, darling. You be ready to elope at midnight and leave the rest to me.
Oh, Oliver.
Goodbye, ducky lover.
Goodbye, devil dumpling.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
It was fun because it was hard. We really, we worked very hard, and my face got all pushed out of shape several times, and I got my foot clear up in the air, you know, getting into the thing. And it was hard, but it was fun.
Oh!
Finally, everything is loaded, and we give a burp, and the car goes up in the air.
And Stan would laugh. He laughed really hardly, but never at Stan Laurel. He laughed at Hardy. And he would say, while the pictures were running, wasn't he funny? Wasn't he a funny man?
The cameras would just line up on him, and the director would say start. They would think of a piece of business. And they could have done the whole 28 minutes or 30 minutes just on that one scene. He'd never holler cut. The only way they'd finally cut would be that the crew would break up. Every little thing, they could pick up a little piece of business and make a 20-minute scene out of it.
La da 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 dee da 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 dum. Pom pom. La da da dee da dum dum dee dee dee. Pom 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 pom.
Stan never much thought about going out beyond a tremendously effective gag, and simply considering, as a music hall artist would, the beauty of the gag and the way that the laughter be controlled and brought up and built and structured. No matter what he talked about, the gag was always there. And I think it's so typical of him that his last words were a gag. The nurse was preparing the hypo after he had his heart attack, and he played it beautifully. He looked solemn, And he said, I wish I was skiing now. And the nurse was rather startled and says, I didn't know you skied, Mr. Laurel. And he said, no, I don't, but it's I'd much rather be doing that than doing what I'm doing now, getting a lot of needles stuck into me. And he died a few minutes later.
In 1929, sound came to motion pictures, and the immortal Cuckoo song was born. Its composer, Marvin T. Hatley.
And I made this little silly tune as a radio time signal to count the hours. And Stan Laurel came up and heard it and says, that tune's for me. That's just what I want. That little cuckoo part's just what I like. See that? So he says, I'd like to use that for my theme. I says, well, swell. So then I showed him how it was put together. This represents Stan Laurel. It's supposed to be Cuckoo. Same thing over. Not very bright. He's dull. He's stupid, see? That's what that means, stupid. And the big one, Babe, is very dominating, see? Arrogant. He's the boss. Like a bugle call in the army. See? So we put them together.
You start to smile right away. Just the minute it comes on the screen and hear boop, 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 you always started to smile.
It was 1932, and they decided to embark on a tour of the United States and the continent. They were in for an unexpected, pleasant surprise.
At Chicago, they were overwhelmed by the people who came to see them. When they got to New York, it was even more astounding. Wherever they went, there were crowds and the newsreel cameramen, and they simply had no idea that they were so popular. And in a sense, it made them even more insular than they had ever been. And they tended to be insular because Stan's whole life was a studio. And once the shooting day was over, then into the cutting room, worked very closely with the film. And with Babe, it was out to the golf course. He had his friends at Lakeside Country Club.
But he's a jolly good fellow, but he's a jolly good fellow, but he's a jolly good fellow,
The boy who made good revisited his father in the North Country. And whenever they came over in the later years, it was always the same story.
There were mobs of people at every station. And throughout Italy and France both, they have Laurel and Hardy masks. We'd never seen them. So lining up at the station are all of these people. Half of them are wearing the Laurel masks and half of them Hardy masks. Then from Marseille on the way down along the Riviera into Rome, at every station, the train would stop. We found out later what had happened. The engineer had phoned the station ahead and said Laurel and Hardy are aboard. So the train would stop at every station, and here are these mobs of people. They're reaching through the train windows to shake hands, just to touch them. He was a very, very sensitive, a very sincere person. So I had a wonderful life with him, an exciting life. He went to the club for his golf, and he loved his home life. He did carpentry work around the house. He made most of our garden furniture and made little things for me, like my dressing table, vanity chair, and things of that kind. He was really a gourmet. He loved food, but he was very selective in his food.
I think I'll start our place with a bowl of clam chowder.
Chowder, sir.
A large porterhouse steak smothered with onions.
Yes, sir.
A baked potato, lima beans, buttered beets, a combination salad. Now for dessert.
He hated being fat. And it's something that too many people didn't know that, because with other people he would just laugh and say, well, that's the way, that's my bread and butter. I have to be big, and that, and he would ridicule it in that way. But with me, he would, I knew how he felt, and he would, many times, he would stand and He'd walk up behind me. For instance, I'd be at my dressing table or I'd be in front of a mirror, and he'd walk up behind me and he'd say, look at me, look at me. How could you love a great big fat man like me? I mean, that's something I've never told anyone before in my life, but it was, I mean, it's one of those little personal things that do happen between a man and a wife. He never considered himself a comedian. He thought he was a straight man for Stan, and it always amazed him when anyone thought he was a comedian, because he felt that he was just the big boob to make Stan look good.
What they worked out was this peculiar chemistry whereby each made the other funnier. It's an unselfish kind of comedy, and I'm amazed that as far as I know in their career, they didn't have rows over who was getting the odd laugh.
Oh, they couldn't have been more friendly. I mean, at one time I had trouble with Hardy, and I told him he was, I had canceled his contract, and I knew he wasn't going to let me cancel his contract. But Laurel cried, you know what I mean, because he thought that I meant it.
You certainly did. Well, I didn't. You certainly did. Let's put our brains together so that we can forge ahead. Remember, united we stand. Divided we fall.
He had a series of heart attacks, and then he had a massive stroke, and he was an invalid from then on till the end came. Stan came to see him several times. Sometimes Babe would recognize him, sometimes he wouldn't, because at times he would be lucid, at times he wouldn't. So, but Stan came, and he would come every few months to see him. Of course, by that time, Stan had had a stroke himself.
The reason people laughed at it was just as a child and everyone watching it. Those that didn't laugh didn't acknowledge it. Those that didn't think it was funny were those that didn't dream.
I remember first falling in love with two men who were not adults pretending to be children, but two characters who were children pretending to be adults.
What are you doing?
Just playing.
The small child of 4 being led by the child of 5.
Just because you have the mind of a 4-year-old child, you don't need to display it.
And yet still inside the womb of being children. They always stayed inside that circle, you know, and never got further than that.
Stan. He was an observer of life, and he thought that life was so very beautiful, and yet he would never allow it to become other than beautiful by acknowledging the reality of it, and the simplicity of it, and the stupidity of it, and the anger of it, the joy of it, the hate of it. And he was able to transpose those feelings into the most simplistic views for the masses to understand. He was very, very amused at how people mistreated life and that they didn't enjoy it.
You dirty double-crossing squealers. Ain't a jail in this country strong enough to hold me. But when I do get out, I'll break off your legs and I'll wrap them around your neck.
Stop that crying! Now this is your last chance. If you don't tell us where that ring is, over you go.
We can't tell you. We don't know where it is, do we?
How can we tell you if we don't remember? Maybe this will help you remember.
No!
You're charged with vagrancy. Are you guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty, Your Highness.
On what ground?
We went on the grounds. We were sleeping on a park bench.
And Laurel and Hardy are a little bit appalled each time they meet such persons. How does such a person come about?
Thank you, sir. To get out of town! And never let me set eyes on you again.
Oh! Wait!
Shaft.
What are you going to do? Cook something?
Yes, I'm going to cook his goose.
But there comes a time when the cup of humiliation is running over and they just simply have to hit back.
And this is the usual starting point of a comedy technique that they may well have invented, but which they've certainly used in a masterly way in half a dozen comedies. One could define it as reciprocal destruction, and it has since become a classic comedy routine.
Little by little, each character destroys the other. They pull a bit off his house, he pulls a piece off their car.
I know exactly what is going to happen, and I'm fascinated to see the process by which they're going to make it happen.
There's a quaint, ordered logic to it, which is the world of the zany, of the impossible.
They're like two little children who wanted the fight to happen, it seems to me. Little kids want that fight to happen. They put the chip on the shoulder and say, knock it off. And then they wait, and that's what they did. Only they took it to gargantuan dimensions.
It is a ritual because it's recognized as being a form of a game. You are observing the other person's right to have a turn. It's my turn now, Mummy.
It looks vicious, but of course the secret is that it is not. Nobody really gets hurt. And this slow increment of indignity upon indignity is something that I suppose we always want to see happening to other people, and we rather enjoy it in that sense.
It's unbearably beautiful because here's the thing that deep down we all want to do. Now what made me laugh about this, that this destruction is watched by a crowd of spectators who gathered, and every time they went across there, all the spectators would go and watch and made no comment. And then they pulled a bit of the house off, and then all the spectators would rush back here like this and watch this. And that's what knocked me out, that the public would stand by and watch this destruction going on, and they'd prove that man was an idiot, that he would go on destroying himself while watched by a mass of people who would do nothing about it.
Well, it's a film about escalation.
Their conflict was just nothing more than a mirror of the world's conflicts.
And it's absolutely like international diplomacy.
this repetition of it became hypnotic in the end. I thought, don't want them to finish breaking this car up. I want them to go and find something else. Then go and find Stan Laurel's wardrobe and start smashing his wardrobe up. You know what I mean? They all get on a bus and go downtown to where Laurel Hardy's house is, and Finlayson starts to pull that house to pieces. Do you know what I mean?
The mutual destruction increases and increases. You remember at the end of that film, there's nothing left. The car doesn't exist, and the house is in ruins.
And when they finish pulling his house to pieces, they for anything else he's got, you know. They find he owns a laundry in the street, so they all get on a bus, all the audience, the crowd as well. They all get on there, they get off the bus, they smash the window in, they get back on the bus, catch the bus, go all the way back to Laurel Hardy's house. So it can go on and on forever. It leads to war, doesn't it, you know.
Oh, it's gonna get out of here quick!
But somehow or other, these two survive despite it all, and comes out ready for the next advent, you know. Whereas all the heroes perish in blood, these little people keep seem to coming from nowhere, and all is succeeding to be unsuccessful, but continuing on their lives. You know? But lovely relationship, wasn't it?
How to conclude such a story? Cool facts or rush judgments have precious little to do with magic. After the rich and relatively brief period of the vintage short films, Laurel and Hardy had to expand into features that were perhaps less good by comparison. A break with Hal Roach, and then films for other companies, but never again the same magic.
Rapidly and visibly, they were aging. Financial ups and downs. A return to the music hall. Then in 1952, their last picture. To many, a horror film.
A film I cannot watch is Atoll K. I don't want to see my comedians grow too old. I don't want to see them too wrinkled, too hesitant. And so I would prefer to remember Stan and Ollie at their peak, and I'm sure that Stan and Ollie would be remembered in their prime, doing what they did best, as nobody else could do it.
After a long illness, Oliver Hardy died in Hollywood on August the 7th, 1957.
Stan spent the last 8 years of his life with his wife in the flat overlooking the Pacific. He was ill, but he was in good spirits. He was able to enjoy the first waves of new popularity brought about by television. Anyone could ring him. His name was in the phone book. In 1961, he received an honorary, though perhaps belated, Oscar. He dubbed it Mr. Clean. Stan Laurel died on February 23rd, 1965. He was buried at the Forest Lawn Cemetery in Hollywood.
There was quite a big crowd there. All the old comics go, you know. About the only time we old silent comics get together is at the funerals. And we always, afterwards, we see each other and talk, you know, because we see the old-timers thinning out. And I saw a lot of them at Stan's. Buster Keaton was there, and Chester Conklin, and so many, quite a few that are left still. Well, then after I went to Stan's, then Buster died, and then Chester Conklin, and there aren't many left.
Thank you, Ollie. You're welcome, Stan. I want you to remember, from now on, my home is your home. Thank you, Ollie. You're welcome, Stan. I'm sure glad to see you, kid.
Hey, Ollie, you know, this is like old times. You and I been together.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
We sure used to have a lot of fun, didn't we?
We sure did.
You remember how dumb I used to be?
Yeah.
Well, I'm better now.
Well, I'm certainly glad to hear it.
Just work your shoulders, snap your fingers, long and all in the hall, at the ball, and some more. Commence to dancing, commence to dancing, commence to dancing. I want you dancing, slide, slide, dancing. You do the tango jiggle, dances on the wiggle. Hold the order and home, try me and home.
Have you anything else to say?
Well, no. That's all there is. There isn't any more. Is there, Stanley?
No, that's our story, and we're stuck with it. In it.